Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'd like to declare my interest as counsel and senior project leader of a social impact intermediary that works with various stakeholders, including the philanthropic sector. Sir, the way a government manages the collection and expenditure of its revenues sits at the center of how taxation interfaces with society. There are a few ways we can think about taxes. As a mechanism, it is the lever by which a government collects and redistributes resources to different segments of society, including the vulnerable and those who need it most. On a strategic level, tax policy is also an instrument that pools our collective resources to help us shape the society that we wish to see as a people. It is also the means by which we provide incentives for industries to move towards and sectors to grow. At its core, good tax policy can help foster the balance between social harmony and economic progress. There are three broad areas I would like to discuss regarding the bill. First, on taxing gains from the sale or disposal of foreign assets that are received in Singapore by businesses without economic substance, and this will bring us in line with international standards. I would like to ask the Minister for greater clarity on three things. First, MOF has shared that it would not be practical to prescribe in legislation minimum thresholds to establish economic substance, given the variety of business model and scale of operations. Is the approach going to be on a case-by-case basis? What are some of the key principles that would distinguish businesses with economic substance and those without? I also understand that further guidance will be provided in an IRAS e-tax guide. I would like to ask, what is the timeline for the IRAS e-tax guide to be made available for greater regulatory clarity? Finally, what type of firms in terms of industry and size does the government expect these changes to affect the most? My second area of discussion is regarding the Enterprise Innovation Scheme, or the EIS. The EIS is an investment to further secure Singapore's position as an innovation hub, as it helps companies defray risks when undertaking R&D. Due to the long incubation period for innovation and uncertainty, firms may think long and hard before committing upfront resources to innovation. Could the Minister share more about the current constraints faced by companies undertaking capability development activities and how the EIS amendments aim to mitigate them and lower the barriers, in particular for smaller companies which may be cash-strapped? From a tax utility perspective, what other factors are considered important by the government for the R&D ecosystem to grow sustainably beyond subsidies? Are there any existing schemes or new ones which the government is intending to create or to enhance domestic human capital capable of executing the R&D that the EIS hopes to support? And finally, what has the take-up rate been for similar existing schemes? And beyond just utilization, what other success indicators have we tracked for such schemes that encourage R&D and the development of IP? Third, sir, our social spending needs are growing, and I'm heartened by the government's efforts to enhance our social compact through growing our tax base. I also note the launch of the Philanthropy Tax Incentive Scheme and the relevant clauses 30 and 31 in the amendment bill, alongside the broadening of the scope of eligible investments to include blended finance structures, to recognise concessional capital, which aim to strengthen Singapore's position as a regional philanthropy hub, which will also catalyse more investments into worthwhile social and climate projects. In order to achieve this status, our philanthropic framework must tackle key issues of our time, which are typically global in nature and go beyond our shores. For example, climate change, and also at greater scale. For example, wider populations in Southeast Asia and not just Singapore. Our strategic, trusted, and neutral position in this region is prime for such operations. So we are home to more than half of Asia's family offices. The growth in the number of family foundations has generally followed the growth in FOs, and I agree with the push towards encouraging FOs to anchor their giving operations in Singapore. While allowing tax deduction for overseas donations via qualifying local intermediaries shifts the long-standing principle of tax deductions for donations exclusively benefiting the Singapore community, is an understandable step. I hope that we can put in further measures to proactively strengthen the nexus between family offices and our local charitable organizations to ensure that, firstly, overseas donations do not overshadow the proportion of domestic donations from these FOs. Secondly, that the domestic donations are given in a way that are meaningful, demonstrating an understanding of local organizations' needs and that of the clients that they serve. Domestic donations should also be done in a sustainable way, such that charitable organizations have the funding visibility for a longer-term horizon to grow their missions and reach in serving our community, and are encouraged to try new innovative ways to tackle complex emerging social challenges. I would also like to ask how many qualifying local intermediaries are there, how long will it take for local intermediaries to qualify, and what support is available to fund capacity building of social sector organizations. It would also be important to ensure that legislation such as fund regulations and charity laws remain clear and keep up with the times to enable the structuring of such new models. In Singapore, most will agree that our collective contributions should enable us to create a society which uplifts each and every citizen to thrive, regardless of where we start in life. In Budget 2023, DPM Lawrence Wong reaffirmed his commitment to this ideal. However, in an inflationary environment with rising costs of living, many feel the pinch and the execution of increasing taxes when it comes to real life and how we should go about raising funds to pay for increased support is often less straightforward. In conversations, many often point to free healthcare and education systems in some other parts of the world. But less spoken of is the higher tax rates that come with it, government debt, or the culture which has been developed in these jurisdictions over time, where each individual also sees it as his or her responsibility to invest in their own society, not just businesses as corporate citizens, but everyday people too. While we talk about the amendments in this bill, I'd like to take a moment to encourage discourse on attitudes towards taxation while staying away from bogeyman tactics. As we renew our social compact as part of the Forward SG efforts, we need to have more conversations to build consensus on questions that are fundamental to how we tax different segments and distribute resources equitably. To do so, we should do two things. First, aim for greater and more accessible discourse around tax that makes it relevant to the everyday person. And second, we should aim to clearly communicate the benefits and trade-offs of changes to tax policy to ensure that Singaporeans better understand how these changes affect our shared future. So I support the bill.